Hello, this is Kevin with Bangert Inc., and today we're going to take a look at the details behind the Sage Intacct and what we need to set up to be able to have the Sage estimating system interact with the Intacct to be able to pass an estimate from the estimating system to Intacct. So in a previous recording, we had went through and actually showed all the steps of just transferring an estimate over to Intacct if everything was all set up ahead of time. So this session's really focusing on just the detail of what has to be set up in Sage Intacct to actually make that work. So we're just going to focus on the Intacct and primarily security to get the user set up for estimating to be able to use to communicate. So I'm just looking at my dashboard at the moment. I'm going to go up to the application menu. I'm going to come down to company. And under setup is my company settings. So the first thing that we're going to do is we've got to set up something called a web service, Cinder. So I'm going to go up to security, and this is where I can actually see what web services I've already got set up on my system. I'm going to hit edit so I can actually modify those. And when you hit add, that is how you set up a new one. The Cinder ID does have to be spelled a very particular way. So we're going to come back and I'm going to show this again on mine. So right now I'm just going to kind of show, I've got a Cinder ID and a description and then basically the status. So if I close this down and actually just go back in and edit the one I've already got set up, the Cinder ID needs to be Sage with a capital S, little AGE, and EST capitalized. Description could be whatever you want, and then it needs to be active. So that's pretty much all that has to happen for the first piece is just getting the web service Cinder set up. So I'm going to go ahead and back out of here then. The next piece is to set up a role that my user is going to use. So I'm going to go back up to company again. Under admin is a menu option here for roles. And this is where I can set up a role for what estimating needs to interact with it and so forth. So right now I've got a role here set up called estimator for my Sage estimating user and so forth. So same type of thing. I could hit add on the right-hand side. Here's how I get a new one started. And it basically just starts off very subtle with just basically a name and a description. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and go back and actually edit the one that I was just looking at. So here's my Sage estimator user one. So I'm going to go ahead and hit edit there. So in my case, I just gave the role the name of estimator. And my description, I just said Sage estimating user. My understanding is these are not required as far as they are required to set up, but the naming could be, whatever you want to call it. So if you've got something else you want to, see it as and so forth. Once you get this role set up, there's something called view subscriptions where you actually define what tables the system can interact with. So I'm going to go ahead and it's asking me about leaving the page. So I'm going to leave the page here. So basically there's 4 areas that the Sage estimating needs to have rights to interact with it. So there's a few things under administration, company, my accounts receivable, get to access to the customers, and then my job cost information. So I'm just going to kind of start at the top and work my way down through the list there. So under application, the only thing that's needed under the administration permissions is something called an application subscription. So it just needs to be set for view. And that, my understanding is that gets estimating access to, or at least the applications to interact with it for the role. Company. If I take a look at permissions there, because a job shows an estimator the department and location and some of those different things about the job and so forth that could be set up ahead of time, it's got to get access to those tables of data also. So basically, under my company permissions, I need to be able to view departments, view my entities and so forth, view my locations. And those are the only things that are needed under the company permissions, is primarily departments, entities, and my locations. And then I could hit save. If I take a look at my permissions for customer, customers need view. And that's the only thing under customers that is needed is just basically the only thing under AR is the customer viewing. And then jobs is probably got the most amount of information. So with jobs, you have jobs themselves. So because estimating could set up a job, we usually have, view, add, edit, delete, a few more than just view and so forth. Though in most cases, I would probably discourage setting up jobs from an estimate directly because there's a lot of settings in project side of things that the estimator may not know how to answer or set up properly and so forth. So it's usually best still to have someone that knows all the requirements of setting up a job. Probably set the job up first, but as far as the interface goes, they do recommend having view, add, edit, and delete. It also needs to get access to job estimates. So there again, view, add, edit, and delete so it can add an estimate to a job. Needs access to my estimate types. Needs access to my cost codes. That would be cost codes on a particular job. So that way if the job was already set up and already had cost codes and so forth, that it's got access to that list. And then there's a separate section for my standard cost codes. So I would need standard cost codes, standard cost code types. On those, I just need to be able to view the standard cost codes because we're not necessarily creating any additional ones to the standard cost code list. And then I need access to my cost types for, labor, material, equipment, sub, and other. So my different cost types need view, add, edit, and delete also. And that's pretty much the security of what needs to happen on to jobs, which then also concludes my role at this point. So basically, those are the main tables that we need access to. So I'm going to go back up to company. And let's say company again. And let's say admin again. And let's say I'm looking for web service users. So there again, I've got my user already set up. If I hit add just so I can kind of see the starting out point, it's going to come up with a lot of the same information that we're going to see when I go into edit. So primarily it's going to ask for user IDs, last names, first names, email addresses, things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of here and go back into the one I've already got created. So if I go back into edit here. So in my case, I've got my last name, first name, my email address. This is basically for my contact name. This is what is actually considered my user ID in Sage. So when we go to transfer this estimate over to Intacct, this is going to be the username that we're going to use for that security aspect. And then full name needs to be a business type of user. And then they still need to be limited, that they're not necessarily need to be full admins or anything like that. So it's going to be a limited access. And then status is going to be active. So when you first go down through there and set this up, you actually hit the, it'll actually send an email with your password to it. So that way you don't necessarily tell it a password on the web service user and so forth, that you'll get an email with the password in it, that's, what we use on our estimating side. So basically with our company ID, our web service user and so forth, and with the password that we get with the email, that basically then has everything set up that Sage Intacct needs on its side to be able to allow an estimate to come over. And that pretty much concludes the setup aspect on the Sage Intacct. So that's pretty much all the security aspects that have to be set up before you send your first estimate over to my Sage Intacct projects. Please let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.